So, we are watching the Battle of Montgisard by HistoryMarche. Now, I'm not going into this battle blind. This is a battle I've actually looked into, even pre this channel's existence, and it's actually one of my favorites. I love the setup before the main battle, in which Baldwin, the Leper King, or should I call him Chadwin, essentially gets, besieged by Saladin, and Saladin, underestimating the Leper King Baldwin, proceeds to just go on to march to Jerusalem, leaving a force to besiege him, and Baldwin, like the Chad he is, breaks out of the city, breaks through the troops that Saladin left behind, hauls butt to catch up with Saladin, catches him off guard, and then crushes him and his army, which I believe was a bit dispersed around because, Saladin wasn't expecting this, and Saladin had to retreat, I believe on a camel, is what the chronicles said. Essentially had to get away because, his army was destroyed, and this is actually one of my favorite battles, and I'm really happy that HistoryMarche made a video about it, because it's probably my favorite battle of the entire Crusader era of history. And yeah, I think it solidified Baldwin as just a Chad. I don't know how, a Giga Chad, if you would. The dude was a leper, obviously. He lived with that illness, died young to it, and yet he was still cited as being in the thick of the battle and, wrecking shop. I think even some accounts saying that, he couldn't even move his hand, so he needed people, beside him to hold his shield and, weapon, so he charged in. How much more awesome can one be? I love Baldwin. He's actually he's my favorite character of the entire Crusader era of history. And the guy he had a short but amazing life, dude. And I'm so happy that HistoryMarche is now giving him attention, because quite frankly, he is a very underrated king. So, yeah, I don't want to waste any more time. I want to get right into this. The link to the original video is down in the description down below. And if you like my content and you want to help support me, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. It would help my small but humble channel grow, and I would appreciate it very much. With that said, and without any further ado, let's get to it, shall we?
It is August 1177. Under the baking oriental sun, Philippe of Alsace disembarks in the Acre harbour and heads into the cool shadows of its sumptuous towers. He is greeted by a retinue of the illustrious personages of the Kingdom of Jerusalem, but the king himself, the 16-year-old Baldwin IV, awaits Philippe's arrival at the palace. Just offshore, anchored on the sparkling blue of the Mediterranean, an armada of over 150 galleys of the East Roman Empire are ready to carry Philippe's men and the army of Jerusalem to retake Egypt. The warriors of the cross whisper their prayers and prepare to march. Across the horizon, a shadow stirs. Their greatest foe gathers. Saladin.
Money.com.
Amidst the preparations for the Crusader expedition, cracks appear in the Latin and Byzantine coalition, this time among the Franks themselves. While Manuel Comnenos' unimaginably expensive navy lies off the coast, awaiting allies to embark on the greatest campaign in Christendom since the First Crusade, Philippe squabbles with Baldwin over regency and marriages. Baldwin, ill not only from his ever-expanding leprosy, but also a recurrent malarial fever, wishes for Philippe, who is his first cousin, to take the custodianship of the crown. But Philippe is unwilling and pleads that he has only come to the Holy Land as an ordinary pilgrim, not as a ruler. Instead, he is keen to marry one of Baldwin's sisters, Sibylla and Isabella, into his own family. This political jockeying causes consternation in the Jerusalem elite, and the ill-tempered back and forth stretches on for months. Eventually, Philippe resolves that he will move north, taking up arms with his men and fighting alongside Raymond of Tripoli and Bohemond of Antioch. Baldwin is seemingly too ill to join the campaign, so the majority of the kingdom's fighting men move with the Count, 100 knights and 2,000 infantry. Their goal is to alleviate pressure on Antioch by clearing the town of Harim, situated just 18 miles from the city. In addition, the majority of the militant holy orders join Philippe, leaving just a few of their number in the south around Jerusalem. Seeing there will be no invasion of Egypt this year, the fleet from Constantinople departs north also. Philippe and Raymond, on their way north, raid Hama before joining Bohemond in the investment of Harim. Back in Jerusalem, the silence in the palace is disturbed only by the tolling of church bells and the labored breathing of the young king. But to the south, past the sands of the Sinai, comes the throb of war drums and the rattle of saber and stirrup. By late October 1177, Saladin learns that the Roman fleet sailed home, and most men of the army of Jerusalem marched north. This is an opportunity that he will not pass up. Saladin marches at once and leaves his heavy baggage at Al-Arish, bringing only a train with limited supplies, so he can move faster in enemy territory. He sends numerous detachments of fast cavalry ahead of the main army, their task to loot, forage and seize weakly defended towns in order to secure additional provisions for the troops. By mid-November, Baldwin scouts inform him that a substantial force is moving toward his kingdom. Despite being tormented by his lethal malady, the young king finds the strength to assemble a force and move south to intercept Saladin at Ascalon.
It's really his youth that is the part I really like. Like, the dude was 16. When I was 16, well, obviously I wasn't leading campaigns or being a king or any of that, but, like, it's amazing that not only is he, a child, but, like, again, his illness, bro, and the fact that he's doing all of this, it's really amazing, man. Like, the dude was built different, as the kids say.
The Crusaders number around 375 knights and 80 Templars. Contrary to some sources, Baldwin led his men on horseback and was not carried on a litter. At this stage of his life, aged 16, his leprosy disabled his right arm, but did not prevent him from riding. Being effectively one-handed, he received special riding lessons to learn how to control his mount in battle, using only his knees.
That's amazing. Man, he's literally about to take him on with one hand tied behind his back.
Great men of the realm ride with their king. Balian of Ibelin and his older brother Baldwin II of Ramla, Reginald Grenier and Jocelyn III of Edessa, as well as the famous Reynauld of Chatillon, the Lord of Outre-Jourdain, who at this time is certain to become regent in the event that Baldwin becomes fully incapacitated. Grand Master of the Templars, Odo of Saint-Amand, splits off with the Templars to guard Gaza. The total size of Saladin's army is up to 26,000 men, vastly outnumbering the Crusaders.
Insane.
Though much of this force is dispersed to raid and cause disruption within enemy territory, under the command of Ivelinus, a converted Armenian. while Saladin leads the main body of the army, numbering somewhere between 10 and 15,000 troops.
Either way, those odds are insane. Like a few hundred versus thousands. Man.
The Ayyubid army is comprised mostly of light cavalry, but includes a contingent of elite Mamluk bodyguard and well-trained Egyptian troops, as well as more veterans and auxiliaries from Syria. Meanwhile, the Crusader host arrives at Ascalon. Along their way to the city, they had already encountered towns pillaged by the Ayyubid raiding detachments, which have by now penetrated deep into the kingdom. But Baldwin knows that the main enemy force is yet to come. The king sends out a call to arms for all able-bodied Christians to come to his banner in this moment of utmost peril for the realm. By November 22nd or 23rd, the vanguard of Saladin's main host is sighted. With the weak winter sun reaching its premature zenith, the two monarchs come within sight of each other. Saladin, the Muslim sultan, astride his mount, cape and turban tapering in the cold wind. On the battlements, between the crenellations of its walls, the teenage king looks back, his mail burnished and the blood image of the cross emblazoned on his tunic. Baldwin waves his gloved hands, and the signal indicates that Jerusalem will march out to meet the enemy. He and his knights deploy in front of the walls of Ascalon, perhaps not anticipating the large army they are about to encounter. As they form up, the 375 Frankish knights and some 1,000 infantry levied from the city can only watch as Saladin's army comes into view. Their numbers grow until there is an unbroken line on the horizon. This army has come to destroy them all. Facing the Ayyubid force that's at least 10 times their number, the Crusaders withdraw back into the city.
Yeah, rightfully so, because that's insane. Yeah, fighting all that insane, at least he ain't dumb, right? Yeah, again, like, I can't even imagine witnessing that, be like, oh heck no, we ain't fighting that, bro.
Saladin orders his vanguard to surround Baldwin at Ascalon and leaves another detachment to besiege Odo at Gaza. Having left his heavy baggage at Al-Arish to improve mobility, the Ayyubid army cannot linger for long in one place. The Sultan moves on with the bulk of his army, following the main road towards Ibelin, where there is a bridge across the Sorek River.
Yeah, it's really interesting that Saladin's zeal to capture Jerusalem ultimately led to this campaign's, failure, right? Leaving behind his baggage, not kind of underestimating Baldwin or not dealing with the king, and he couldn't, obviously, because he left the baggage, as he just said. So in his haste and in overlooking Baldwin, it ultimately led to his defeat. So that's kind of funny how he rushed into it. And how these factors kind of came back to bite him in the butt, you know?
Formidable obstacle during medieval times. His forward raiding detachments have already taken the key bridge over the Ayalon River north of Ramla, another significant obstacle for any army passing through the area. Now, nothing remains between him and Jerusalem, save for several garrisons. Saladin's first encounter with Baldwin went in his favor. He organized scout patrols to screen the rear of his column just in case, but he likely did not regard the small force under the 16-year-old king to be a threat.
Yep. And I can definitely get why he would, think that, but again, still, it doesn't change the fact that his underestimation of Baldwin and overlooking him was a huge mistake.
But Saladin had underestimated his young opponent. Thinking that Jerusalem itself is in danger, Baldwin relays an urgent message to Odo to break out of Gaza, which the Grand Master successfully does, together with 80 Templars, and dashes north to meet with the king. At Ascalon, Baldwin leads a surprise sortie of his own, breaking the Ayyubid blocking force.
I love this moment. Dude just breaks out and just goes for it, which is amazing. Again, bro, 16-year-old leopard, and he is amazing.
This time, news of Saladin's march reaches Jerusalem. Widespread panic erupts in the city, and many take shelter in the Tower of David. The populace fears that soon the cross over the Temple Mount will be cast down, and a new dawn will break over the faithful everywhere. Back at Ascalon, Baldwin gathers the 450 knights, and with additional 1,000 infantry collected in Ascalon, he proceeds to follow Saladin. Further afield, many of the Christian fighters who answered the king's call to arms were intercepted by Saladin's roaming detachments over the past few days. But around 2,000 made it through, joining the king in the vicinity of Ibelin. The king's army now numbers around 3,000 men, but he is still outnumbered between 3 and 5 to 1 by the main Ayyubid force at Ramla.
Build a website.
On November 24th, the Crusaders are spotted by Muslim scouts. Saladin can see Baldwin's banner. The King of Jerusalem is within reach. The Crusaders have grown in number. Intercepting them now is the right move. The Sultan decides to force a battle before the boy king can recruit more troops. But then, the Crusader column suddenly changes course. It appears they are trying to bypass Ramla, not wanting to face the much larger Muslim host. The Crusaders march hastily along what seems to be a deserted path. It is anything but deserted. In fact, this territory belongs to Baldwin II of Ramla and his brother Balian of Ibelin, who know the lay of the land. This path is unknown to the Muslims, but the two brothers know it very well. It leads across the Giza stream and past the small town of Montgisard. They know that in November, the overflowing stream soaks the ploughed fields to its north, making the area muddy and marsh-like. If Saladin goes after them into this difficult terrain, he will be vulnerable despite his numerical superiority.
Geography, bro. You never underestimate the power of geography in warfare. It's a very underrated aspect, but as we see, the great advantage of knowing the land and utilizing it to your advantage. And yeah, I like that aspect in war. Like when people do that, it's just so cool to me.
King Baldwin and Reynold agree that this is where they will confront Saladin. The added benefit of choosing this location is that if the Crusaders were to be defeated, they could easily evade any Muslim pursuers by using the path to escape east into the mountains and towards Jerusalem. By the time the Sultan begins crossing the stream at Montgisard, the Crusaders are rounding the ridge to the east and going out of sight into the valley beyond. The Sultan moves sharply, but without the frantic rush with which his campaign progressed at its outset. Constrained by the topography, his column piles up near the bridge, and additional effort is needed to maneuver the army through the soggy ground and across the stream's ravine. There seems to be no danger of an ambush at the crossing point, as the Crusader army is at least 3 miles, or around 5 kilometers, to the east. Saladin and his officers urge the men on, as they want to close the distance with Baldwin. By around noon, some 9,000 troops have crossed, but once the Sultan reaches the eastern side of the ridge, he sees that the Crusaders are waiting in battle formation in the valley below. At most, the young king now commands 500 heavy knights, trained in elite warfare since childhood, but these are a fraction of Saladin's 2,500 heavy cavalry. Behind the line of knights is the larger component of 2,500 infantry, assembled in the days prior to the battle. Realizing the danger, Saladin hastily begins forming his lines, but it is too late.
Yeah, and again, we've seen this several times before, in which an enemy, whether they're crossing like a stream or a river, is usually where they're most vulnerable, and attacking them. Like, I think the most famous example we saw was definitely like when Napoleon was trying to cross, and he was attacked by Archduke Charles, and that was a pretty decisive defeat he gained over Napoleon. And we've seen it other times, like with the Punic, Sicilian wars, instantly negating a numerically superior army just by the geography of them having to funnel their way through, like here, this narrow passage. And essentially it's kind of like a form of divide and conquer, is that Saladin can't utilize his full force off the bat, which kind of negates a lot of his thing, and he was outwitted by simply his enemies being far more knowledgeable of the terrain and geography. So again, I love seeing that in warfare. It's such a great, use. And I just love it, like I said, when we see that stuff. And yeah, again, the initiative has been seized by Baldwin. Saladin came in swinging with all the momentum in the world, but he's essentially been slowly reduced to a crawl as the Crusaders, again, took the initiative, and now he's falling for them. You get me? So again, it's amazing. I love this battle.
Baldwin, finding an energy he attributes to nothing less than the Holy Spirit, moves his men with iron faith and prevails on them to ride with him. The knights follow in his wake. Saladin's main focus is to organize his mounted archers and heavier squadrons, knowing that the first charge of the heavy Crusader cavalry will be the most difficult to overcome. Once the knights make contact, his outer wings will flow around and envelop them in a crushing flanking maneuver.
The oldest trick in the book, but unfortunately, it won't be successful.
Crusaders can see that the Ayyubids are forming up along the top of the ridge and possess a clear terrain advantage. Every moment lost, Baldwin knows, is a moment in which Saladin will gain strength. The young king goes into full...
Yeah, that's kind of the thing, though. Definitely, hiding, in the valley below helped Baldwin gain the surprise over Saladin, who wasn't expecting the fight to happen, right then and there. But at the same time, Saladin has the high ground, which is always the advantageous position. And he's being reinforced as the fight progresses, so Baldwin has to strike quickly and now in order to face Saladin at his weakest, right? Or else, again, every moment wasted, he grows only stronger. So yeah, the stakes are there. It's basically like a race against time for Baldwin.
Full gallop. The knights ride on through the hail of bolts that drop out of the sky. Their armor renders the vast majority of the shots harmless. Saladin's bodyguard in their yellow tunics close around him as the deluge of men and animals comes on without interruption. Muslim lances are thrust down as the Crusader cavalry pummels into the Ayyubid line. To Saladin's dismay and consternation, the shock of Baldwin's charge wedges deep within his ranks, men flying backward as though they are puppets yanked by a string. Knights
That is
break
so
or
cool.
lose their lances and draw swords, cutting through the front lines of the Ayyubid formations. Seeing that they
And again, that's the power of the medieval knight. Like, we've seen the medieval knight and how, despite even when it's outnumbered, how much damage they can do to their enemies. Like, a good example would be like the Battle of Ankara, for example, right? Like, when Bayezid fought Timur, and Bayezid's contingent of the Serbian knights were able to go hard and inflict heavy damage upon, I believe it was Timur's left, and even before that when Bayezid fought the Crusaders, and how despite gaining victories, even on the losing side, the medieval knights still inflicted heavy damage upon their enemies, because even though they might not have quantity, they have quality, because again, knights were trained from like basically childhood to be like great warriors, and even on the losing side, they can inflict such heavy casualty upon the enemy, and that's just the power of and a testament to how great medieval knights were and how powerful. And you can kind of see that on display here. That, and also just the fervency. Like, that's something so unique about this battle. Baldwin like had this obviously he calls it like this power through the Holy Ghost, and I also would attribute it to just pure adrenaline. Like, there's a desperation. They're fighting like, like with a type of fervor and desperation that's unmatched, because they know that if they lose, that's it. So that can definitely drive you to push even harder than you normally would. So, and that again with the religious fervor of being, Christians and believing God is definitely on our side. Like, there are many psychological factors like that I think is really pushing them to fight like madmen. And yeah, Saladin was caught off guard multiple times in this video, as we see, not expecting things, and you can just see that the initiative that he started with was seized away from him.
are getting discomfortingly close, Saladin gives the order for the cavalry on the flanks to move out and around the Crusader line to attack them from the wings and the rear. But his cavalry are rooted to the spot, as the Latin infantry has arrived in good time and are supporting Baldwin's cavalry attack, precluding the Ayyubid companies from attacking the flanks.
We met.
The Latins in the fore, with the Templars at their center, burst through his lines of guards, and for a moment the Sultan is completely undefended. A helmeted knight, his face completely obscured by a steel visor, aims his horse through the opening and rides full force for the Sultan. Saladin's
Holy
eyes
crap.
widen. He raises his own weapon, but the Frank has the reach and the motion. 3 of his bodyguards wrest themselves of their own attacks to prevent the attack on their Sultan. Saladin is quickly pulled to the rear, and there he attempts to rally and inspire his...
Dude, talk about a close one, right? Imagine Saladin died right there, but that goes to show you just how these guys are fighting with a ferocity that even is unnerving to Saladin. He almost died right there. It kind of gives me the vibes of Gargamella. Remember when Alexander was trying his hardest to get close to Darius? Like, he was trying to get at him. Though Saladin, it kind of reminds me of that situation.
soldiers. A cavalry charge is attempted to push the Latins back. Fierce fighting erupts, and for the first time, the Crusaders lose momentum. But the army of the Leper King is too closely packed and supported by both foot and horse companies working together. Saladin attempts another charge in the wake of the first. Another flurry follows, But this too comes to nothing. The desultory feeling amongst the Muslim rank and file starting to grow. The Crusaders, with the captains at their head, begin the final charge. The men of the proud army of Egypt and Syria are scattered from the field.
Literally overpowered them. That's amazing. That despite any counter charges that Saladin tried, it's like we've seen times where, like, yeah, an army has great momentum, like the Crusaders just did right here, and then like eventually they tire out and then are being able to be pushed back by an enemy of superior number, especially one that's actively being reinforced like Saladin. But this one is unique in that the charge, though pushed back just a little, really wasn't like stopped in its tracks completely. They just kept going. They literally brute force their way through this. Again, like the ferocity of Baldwin and his men is just astounding, and this is why it's like one of my favorite battles of all time. To have learned about, like I said, I've covered, and I haven't covered, but I looked into this battle and watched some videos even before this channel existed, EDJ Reacts, so I am familiar with it, and I loved it. Yeah, you know, when I used to play Dungeons and Dragons, I used to implement, like, I when I was creating my own world, I kind of did like a homebrew thing, you know, my own continent and like kings and legacies and all that. The king of the campaign that my players were in was like an amalgamation of many different tactical geniuses who, like, you know, like Hannibal Barca, Napoleon, Caesar in a sense, and, you know, some of them were even based off of real historical figures, and in one, Baldwin here, someone who overcame great odds. So, like, you know, I was definitely inspired, though my friends didn't get on at the time, if you know, because they weren't really into war and tactics and stuff like I was. But yeah, like Baldwin was an inspiration in building some of my, you know, alternate fantasy world king history and his campaigns. So yeah, overall, like, I don't know, I really admire him. And again, to achieve so much in his youth, he lived the amount of bravery it takes to have lived life the way he did. I mean, again, he was a kid. I know 16 people had to mature differently back then. You know, some people got married at like 13, but I think personally, a kid is still a kid. A teenager is still a teenager. Obviously there can be mature teenagers and stuff, but I just think by natural youth and life experience, a teenager in any era, you know, is still a kid and, you know, not a grown adult. And the fact that he still did all this makes him more impressive to me. And you know, it really is amazing. I really do love Baldwin, and I'm, you know, I know we kind of rag on Ridley Scott in this channel a lot because of his historical inaccuracy in his films, and especially the atrocity that was Napoleon 2023. But if there's one thing I do appreciate Ridley Scott for doing, is making Baldwin pretty popular among the general populace, even outside of like the historians, history buff circle that you and I inhabit. Baldwin's pretty popular. He got kind of like the Aurelian treatment, like he's depicted with his Kingdom of Heaven mask and stuff, but like, you know, he's kind of known outside of the historian / history buff circle, and I think that's like one of the best things Ridley Scott has ever done, helping Baldwin catch a lot of notoriety, you know? Like I said, he's a historical figure who is deserving of a lot of praise and accolades, and I'm a fan of him from this one battle alone. So yeah.
Worse for Saladin, the enemy push has arrived just as some of his carriages clogged up the bridge.
Oh, that sucks.
His retreating troops find themselves pressed against the river ford, resulting in massive losses. The teenage monarch Baldwin has won a victory of unparalleled decisiveness over the Sultan famed for his valor and ingenuity in battle. Exact numbers are not known, but William of Tyre writes that the Latins lost around 1,000 men, while nearly the entire Muslim army was annihilated at Montgisard. Though this is certainly an exaggeration, Saladin surely suffered significant casualties. Worse is to come for the Ayyubids in the aftermath. With their army splintering into even more disparate groups, the countryside that they had been pillaging now turns on them as the Latins and the Bedouin clans enact massacres and looting on the fleeing companies. Fast messengers are sent to Cairo, where the decree goes out that Saladin has won a huge victory and his person is safe. He and his illustrious soldiers will soon return to the city. Shrewd counselors in the citadel realize the code of these words and discern that a terrible calamity has befallen the Sultan. Saladin does eventually arrive back, having dodged the ambushes and murderous pursuers, and he begins a process of reasserting his power and rebuilding his army. The invasion has been a disaster, but it is not the end for him. Saladin's will and ambition are such that this is only the beginning. Meanwhile, Baldwin commissions a new monastery to be built on the site of his great victory, and in him, Christendom has found a new, unlikely champion. Observers...
in the long run, though, obviously with hindsight, this was a setback, but a temporary setback for Saladin. We do know eventually he does eventually take Jerusalem, so but still at the moment it's still really such an awesome moment,
Chroniclers wait with trepidatious excitement to see what fate has in store for both of these extraordinary men. If you like what you see, consider supporting my work.
Despite being progressively crippled by leprosy, Baldwin personally commanded armies, sometimes carried into battle on a litter. Muslim chroniclers, including Saladin's own biographers, respected Baldwin as a courageous and capable adversary despite his affliction. Baldwin died in 1185 at just 24 years old. Still ruling despite years of severe illness, his death destabilized the kingdom of Jerusalem, setting the stage for Saladin's victory at Hattin in 1187. Yeah, throughout Baldwin's life, he managed to keep Jerusalem from the paws of Saladin, but obviously, with his death, kind of showed, right? And it's a shame. If he only had not been afflicted by illness, he maybe could have kept Saladin at check for a longer time, who knows? But again, fate was not kind to him in terms of his illness, right? Early in life, Saladin showed more interest in religion and scholarship than in military affairs, but family connections and the times pushed him into command. Before Saladin, the Muslim world was fractured. He managed to unite Egypt, Syria, parts of Mesopotamia, and the Hijaz under his rule, creating a powerful coalition against the Crusaders. A coalition that Saladin had to actually work really hard to keep, by the way. There was a lot of conflict among his camp, and he was struggling at times to keep everyone on the same side. It's kind of funny. It kind of mirrors the Crusades, because the Crusades are known to be such crap shows where everyone is going against each other, and in a weird way, Saladin was kind of having that the Muslim equivalent, so it's an interesting reverse. But obviously Saladin's will and his personality could keep everyone connected long enough for him to enact and accomplish his own ambitions and goals.
On Patreon, sacrifice. I'll see you in the next one.
So this was another fantastic video. I loved it very much, and yeah, guys, we'll do something new tomorrow. Bye, everyone.